That's really the big question we're asking in debate. Should we or shouldn't we do something, this thing or that thing? So, continuing with our little thing. Observation satellites. Potential affirmatives in this area. The answer is obviously. I can imagine it'd be pretty hard to swing a cat on Google without hitting a card that says that spy satellites are super key to United States hedge. Insert card of your choosing. All right? And the result is, I think that they're incredibly important to intelligence gathering activities. They were the thing that verified the intelligence we had, for instance, that led to the assassination / killing / insert verb you want of Osama bin Laden. All right? They're incredibly crucial to our ability to accurately target nuclear weapons and/or precision-guided or prompt global strike and those sorts of things. Precision-guided munitions use them for all this stuff. It's a major part of the way we do business in the world militarily. You can easily, all right. And our spy satellites, BT Dubs, are super old. A lot of them, literally, here's how they work. Aside from the newest ones we put up, they have cameras with film. They take photographs. And then they shoot the film back down to Earth in a canister. All right? A few things have happened. One, a lot of them have run out of film in canisters. They're totally useless hunks of junk orbiting the Earth. We do have a program in place that's secret, supposedly. And if so, you ask yourself, how does Josh know? All right? And that's because I'm super hooked up. All right? And now I'm going to share this with you. All right? That we're upgrading a bunch of them. They actually have, hands down, the best lenses anyone's ever built. All right, they're like really fancy stuff, so just letting them die would be wasteful. And everybody knows that our government never wastes anything. Right? Communication satellites. You could read an app on this that's got some sort of like economy or tech advantage or something like that. Honestly, my sort of line of thinking on a lot of these ones is that, things like, competitiveness and stuff like that. Like, if it's been like 19 straight topics, and that's been an advantage on every topic, there's probably a reason that your app isn't the one thing that solves it. But you could, maybe you're a sort of small app or something, still link to a bunch of dis ads and stuff, though I'm not sure it would necessarily where you'd want to be. But you could do different sort of like telephony technologies and stuff like that. Navigation satellites. This one, I think, is potentially a really good affirmative because the GPS system is really getting strained, has some serious interference. There's questions over the replacement European system is comprehensive enough and whether it's sufficient. And the important thing is that all this tech is out there now that already uses the GPS system, all right, and is looking for it. So if you wanted to switch to this Russian system or this European system, you'd have to throw away every GPS thing that you've had before. But there's serious problems and serious age with GPS, all right? Like, there's some pretty good arguments. First of all, that GPS is super key to the response of like emergency services in the United States. Ambulances, fire, police, stuff like that. They use that to get around now. It's also really important, the most important use of GPS is for navies, all right, and for maritime shipping. All right, people don't get out like big sea charts anymore, and search for the X and kind of thing like that. You use GPS now to navigate around the world. Shipping is a really important part of the economy, and there's also lots of different SLOCs. Does anyone know what a SLOC is?
Somebody said it.
Yeah, somebody pop it. Who said it?
Sea lanes of communication.
Right. Explain what that means.
Basically,
louder, please.
They're like lanes of how we communicate or trade with the rest of the world, I guess.
There's a couple of pinch points in the ocean, basically. Kind of almost like a construction zone, all right, that are really important trade routes for major shipping channels and stuff. They also, all of them, seems to happen to exist in really major flashpoints. If you control one of those, you're pretty much a global badass, all right? So like Suez Canal, Panama Canal, Straits of Malacca, places like this. Lots of good impact cards and arguments about that. If GPS starts going down, it will cause more crowding, all right? Less effective shipping. All of these things will start to happen. Air travel, same deal, right? Airplanes sort of need GPS. I think there's some really cool advantages that you could read potentially with upgrading our navigation satellite system. Weather satellites. What on earth would a system of more accurate and successful weather satellites be good at detecting and studying and knowing and helping to solve? Harley. Bam! Climate change and environment stuff. All right? Little story. Way back when, anybody here remember the last space topic? Trick question. None of you were alive except for me and Tracy, probably.
1980.
Yeah. That was my novice year of debate.
Alive.
Huh?
I was alive.
Barely. Yeah. And that's how old I am. The resolution started out without that beyond the Earth's mesosphere phrase in it. And what, like August, was that when we got it? Because everybody went to camp and basically came back reading a bunch of climate change affirmatives. All right? Everybody was like, hey, wait a minute, we don't have to look outside? Well, forget, we're just going to read a bunch of warming apps, basically. Put up a bunch of satellites to study it, prove it's true, help solve it, because warming's like the biggest impact ever, except for asteroids. So the resolution was actually modified at the end of the summer, before the season started, because they were like, oops, we broke it. All right, weather satellites, if you can win that T, all right, given our old experience with that, potentially tough to do, but all the same. Research satellites, all right, and here's the meat of everything, all right, and the different affirmatives, all right. Solar-powered satellites would be classified as research satellites, probably, at least under my system. All right, the satellites that our lab uses that puts up in a different Venus-like orbit to look for asteroids and near-Earth objects that are potentially impacting the Earth. All research satellites. All of these, and quite a few, almost any app you would do would depend heavily on the use of research satellites. So continuing on, it's a good idea. Here's the part you really cared about, the core negative arguments. Here's everything you need that you ought to be packing in order to make this work well for yourself, all right? First, you need some disads that are launch-related, all right? Any affirmative that does a serious amount of work in outer space is going to have to get stuff to space, and it's going to have to launch more rockets. All right? And if you're launching more rockets, you ought to have some disads to space launches. All right? There's some, admittedly not awesome, but, like, not super true, but good in the debate sense cards that say it totally wrecks the ozone layer. It's really bad. It causes different types of pollution and stuff like that. Have a few of those types of turns with you all the time. All right? They're good in almost every debate on this topic because everyone's going to have to launch to get stuff up there. All right? Next, space junk. Anyone that puts a bunch more satellites in orbit is going to crowd those different lanes. And as you saw, it's not like there's an even distribution of satellites throughout space. There's basically 3 spots they're in, right? There's geosynchronous, there's semi-synchronous, and then there's near-Earth orbit. Near-Earth orbit's getting crowded because what happens when a satellite runs out of juice? Do they just bring it into the gas station?
Just stay there.
They just leave it there. All right. Now, lately they've begun the practice of beginning to deorbit them. All right, which means you get approval from the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, by the way, is the one that controls where everything goes out there, which is sort of ridiculous. I mean, why do they do it? But anyway, right? They begun to deorbit them lately, but to tell you the truth, it's still getting kind of crowded. It's actually tough these days to find a good geosynchronous spot. You actually have to negotiate and win a bunch of regulatory approval and stuff. Space junk, turns, and disads, also good standbys to have. Not because they're going to win the round on their own, but because they're going to give you some good traction on solvency stuff. Say, problem with your satellites is they're going to make things really crowded, stuff's going to get knocked around, they're not going to work. Space mill, always a fave. All right? Probably that's because I've been covered 80 times in lectures already. I don't need to go over space militarization too much. Everybody's had practice debates and stuff. Yeah, does anybody Okay, good. Topicality. All right? We've had this T question. Is it development? Is it exploration? Blah, blah, blah. Here's the important claims I think you need to be able to win on T. Claim number 1 is I think most of these satellites affirmatives are going to focus on development as being the way that they are topical. All right? But if their type of satellite is topical because of the sort of development it allows, all right, then any type of satellite activity probably is. All right? Which really blows up the resolution in a lot of ways and forces you to start preparing negative for a lot of different things. All right? That's kind of the argument that you need to be sitting on here, is the way that they ultimately sort of unlimit the resolution in a way that allows for an extensive number of Earth-focused activities to become topical. All right? You need to have a good T violation ready for satellite-based affirmatives. Don't say to yourself, I need an SPS T, I need a T for this, I need a T for that, or anything like that. Generically, have a good satellites that look back at Earth or matter because of what they do for stuff on Earth shouldn't be T. All right? Work on that, just kind of have that ready. So we've already got 4 things. Finally, and most importantly, a counterplan. Japan, Russia, or privatization. All right? You know how many satellites the United States launches every year? Barely any, actually. It's in the single digits for meaningful non-defense related stuff. The United States, and this is going to get to, launch vehicles is later in the week, right? Or did that happen already? It happened? All right, so you all know how like the U.S. launch vehicles are super old and stink and everything, right? Case in point, DirecTV owns 12 satellites that are currently in orbit. You know how many of those have been launched by the United States?
None.
One, first one. After that, all European, mostly Russian, a few from space launch, which is that cool thing out in the sea. Japan, largest launcher of satellites now. All right? They put up more than anyone else. All right? Russia is number 2. Private companies are number 3. That space launch being the big one. All right? And frankly, there's not a whole huge reason why the United States has to do any of these. So a combination, right, of some core negative arguments indicate that, like, Japan would be better at it. If the United States does it, it'll cause us to militarize space. It's going to make things really crowded. Launches aren't going to be necessarily good, and you're not T, is a pretty decent 1NC to have ready. I'm probably reading politics did that, obviously, if you're using an international agent counter plan. It's a pretty good 1NC to have in the box and ready to go for any affirmative that uses satellites. I'd say to myself, I have a pretty good generic strategy ready. You can start to substitute in specific solvency arguments and stuff like that as the season develops. But let's keep in mind that pretty much all of this are arguments that you already basically have. If you take an hour of time, sit down, pick out the right cards, and have yourself with a good sort of satellite set of arguments, you're pretty much ready to go against an unbreakable satellite staff. Obviously, SPS is now being run here, so I would focus myself just a little bit more on different, like, you know, make sure your SPS strat specific. But generically speaking, pretty good strat right off the bat. And I think these are things that you just obviously have to have all of the time. There was one other thing I said was one other thing I wanted to cover. Huh? ASATs, right. I did not have a slide for this. I only thought of it this morning. Who knows what an ASAT is?
Anti-satellite weapons.
That's kind of, well, I guess it would fall under space mill, basically. ASATs are banned currently under several international treaties. There is a decent argument to be made, and they haven't been very successful so far. China has recently tested one, though, but they haven't deployed it, and they claim that they're, as a result, not violating any treaty commitment or anything. And the specific treaty commitment that bans ASATs for the United States is a bilateral treaty. I believe it's SALT II that bans ASATs. Anybody know, is it SALT II? Pretty sure it's SALT II. Pardon? Yeah, it might have been ABM, actually. So we might not be bound by that anymore. But anyway, anti-satellite weaponry, significant satellite developments, especially, two ways you could get to it. Number one, ABM? Okay, I know we still follow no ASATs, though, even though we're not arguably technically bound. Space mill gets an easy way. I think there's a good impact scenario to the space jump one, which is that if space starts to get too crowded, we'll develop anti-satellite weapons under the cover of pretending that they're for clearing out space right now, which is too crowded. And the result is then that we'll develop ASATs, and that'll cause escalation of wars and extinction of life all over the planet and everything like that. Basically, more military sets, more ASATs, they kind of go hand in hand, basically. Questions in the next 4 or 5 minutes? Yes?
But what was the purpose of having the radio signals being sent back to Earth? Was it like positioning? Was it like, look, I'm over here, I can talk?
It was just like, hey, I'm Sputnik, what's up? You know, it was because everyone could turn on, and they sent it like over like an AM signal too. Like you could like actually like Sputnik sent one out where like you could like turn on your radio and you could tune in Sputnik. All right, and you could imagine how much that freaked. I mean, like for us, it's not a big deal, space travel. All right, but imagine if like something happened like, I don't know, something massive like, you know, imagine if there were like aliens out there and you could turn on your car radio and be like, hey, I'm going to tune into the aliens. All right, so I can look like, and you could be, people are like, yeah, there's aliens. You totally just go to like AM 880, and there they are. You know, like you would totally, I mean, like you'd freak out. All right, I mean, and so people were, I mean, I can't really, like, I can't exaggerate just how scared people were. Like everybody was convinced that like the death rays weren't imminent from Sputnik. And it, I mean, it did a great, it was brilliantly designed to do that. Yeah.
Of the 3 ASATs you listed, which do you think would be one of the stronger arguments?
Um,
Or is it just all personal tile?